Well, we have an outdoor education program. I do either large groups, like a whole classroom, and we do a unit either on traditional knowledge in the forest, or there's the sports stuff, there's the hockey team, or small groups. Might take a like skilled age group or whatever, and we'll go and do something in the bush, depending on where they're at and what they're comfortable with. Most of our kids, it'd be K to 7. One of the things I'm really proud of is we try to keep in touch with our high school kids. A lot of our kids they do very well here in this setting, and they get to high school and everything changes, and there's a huge drop off in success. So we use our high school students a lot. The hockey program, I always have the high school kids back coaching hockey. If we're going on a long field trip, we bring as many of them as we can with us, just to keep that connection. That's really important, and it seems successful. We always try to have an elder if we're in a territory from that territory, just out of respect. Parents are always welcome. We're in kind of a tough spot here economically, and there's not a lot of trust between the school district and our community. So if we could bridge that, yes, and we have some parents that are in all the time, we almost can't get rid of them, which is great. And then we have some that just aren't ready yet, right? And that has a lot to do with multi-generational trauma. I've taught here for 8 years, and I just found that classroom's not working. It's really hard to be successful sitting down at a desk for 6 hours a day. So just an alternate setting, right? And be that at the hockey rink, or just walking the trails around here, or out in the bush. It's just a different way of learning. You're using different parts of your body, different parts of your brain. It's kinesthetic. It's like there's learning outcomes, but the experience is the learning. Like I could bore you with learning outcomes. I guess it depends on the which. I'm thinking of an example. Cambium stripping. So the people of the interior of BC, right around now this time of year, traditionally they would strip the cambium off of a young pine tree and eat it, right? And I like to take the kids out and sample that, and it leads to lots of questions. What you think of maple syrup, right? What's it like? Is it similar? What kind of a food is that? It's a social studies thing. I have examples of a couple culturally modified trees that were cambium stripped 100 years ago, so we can core those and count the rings, and you can figure out how old that tree was when it was stripped and what year it was stripped, right? So you're finding, I think, the oldest cambium stripping I ever found was about 150 years old, which is pretty amazing because pine trees, right, they're not old trees. So yeah, and so that's history, that's science, it's math. Try to do it all at the same time. And for a lot of kids, it's just getting out and getting some fresh air, and even learning how to walk in the bush it's different than walking in town, right? So we are a choice school. We're the first Aboriginal choice school, public Aboriginal choice school in BC. But the truth of the matter is we're a community school, and we are in the poorest urban community outside of the Lower East Side of Vancouver in British Columbia. And that's an Indigenous population. I mean, I think we're about 96% Indigenous. We're also about 96% for, kids at high risk for the effects of poverty. I have a real hard time with the whole choice school name, because it's a great feather in hats politically to have that. But the bottom line is we are a neighborhood school in a neighborhood feeling the effects of poverty, and that is, that's multi-generational racism. That's been, that's just the honest truth of it. So, I mean, I think if you're teaching Indigenous education, you have to be aware of that, and you have to be aware of where that comes from, and you have to account for it. And we do that here in a whole bunch of ways. I mean, we're honest. We meet people where they're at, and we welcome everyone. And we I mean, we try to be as culturally honest as we can be. It's tough because we are in an urban center, so it's Leyte territory. But I mean, we have kids from prairies, we have kids from the coast, right? And they all bring with them protocols and worldviews that are different, right? Like, and you have to treat all those with respect. So it's a balancing act. You know, a real problem I have is you see in education the tokenistic approach to First Nations education. You know, we get beautiful borders to go around our bulletin boards, right? Teachers all have them, like rainbows or whatever. Ours, you know, they're all teepees, or you know, I have a problem with that. Like, you know, teepees not, you know, I don't think really a, well, it is, but you know, when you start defining people by certain assumptions, right? We should make a dream catcher. We should. It just leaves a sour taste in my mouth. I worked as an archaeologist for 15 years before I became a teacher, and I got to work, you know, pretty close with elders in different areas, and you know, everyone has something valuable to share, and everyone deserves that respect. Like, there's a, you know, an assumption when you think of BC, you think of the coastal First Nations and their, you know, their beautiful big ocean going canoes and the artwork, and there's a stigma that you know, northern interior nations are, you know, have less value. Maybe they weren't here as long, and it's just wrong, and it's I think that's one of the things we address here is identifying that, you know, how valuable everyone's contribution is. Our kids are they're behind. When they come in, they're behind, and when they leave, they're behind. And you know, the education, the Ministry of Education is really touting this meeting kids where they're at. Right? If I send a kid from grade 7 to grade 8, and it says in, you know, my report card he's doing grade 5 math, then if I were that teacher, I would be teaching him grade 5 math. But we're coming up against this wall. Well, I teach grade 8 math, right? I've got 80 kids. You can't expect me to do that. No, well, actually, it is expected. And that's a real tough thing for the high school. I don't envy them that, because that's a hard change to make, but it's an expectation that they make that. And here, like academically, you know, you do your reading evaluations, your math evaluations, and you can categorize kids that are at this level compared to their peers. But when you're behind that, you know, when you're coming in behind because of the pressures of poverty, there are so many other factors. Coming to school hungry, that, you know, how that affects you socially and emotionally. So, like for me, you know, a lot of what I do is social emotional learning. Our hockey program here is one something I'm really proud of. You know, a lot of schools have hockey programs, and our kids are all the kids in our hockey program. None of them play organized sports. They've learned to skate here with us, and they've learned to play hockey here with us. And then they go out, and we have games against schools where kids are on rep hockey teams and they're traveling, and you know, a lot of the time we get beat. There was a time when our kids would lay down on the floor or lay down on the ice after a couple goals went in, and we'd have to drag them off the ice because they're emotionally drained by this, and they don't know how to respond to winning or losing. Right? We had a tournament this winter, and I had teachers from all kinds of other schools. You know, because we got snappy New Jersey. Now, oh, where are you guys from? What school is that? Your kids were great. They were so polite, and they thanked us after the game, and that's the victory. Whether we lost or won, was our kids they have that emotional social confidence to play their best and to accept that they tried their hardest, whether they win or lose, and be happy with that. And that it was nice because a couple of the teachers here who I take a majority of their kids for a morning, and they're like, oh, here you taking half my class in the middle of a lesson. And they came to watch, and they were like, this is great. Like, holy cow, and it's great that we're doing this program. So that was fantastic, right? You can't learn if you're angry, if you're sad, right? You need to be able to regulate. So that has to happen first. I mean, and that took 3 years of banging my head, I'm going to fight through this lesson, and I got kids crying and I'm ready to explode. And, somebody says, like, what you're doing isn't working, right? You have to rethink this, and like you have to meet them where they're at. If you're coming in hungry, we did pancakes today, long weekend, so I had half my class show up in the morning, and I said we're going to wait 10 minutes before we start because there's only half of you here. So we're reading our library books, and 10 minutes go by, no one else showed up. I said, okay, well, I got kids falling asleep. Let's have pancakes. Let's just start our week with a nice ease into it, right? And it made a huge difference for the rest of the day. A huge difference for the rest of the day. Yeah, it's just I don't know, experience, I guess, like meeting people where they're at. Yeah, I mean we work for them. So, and what I see a lot of is you could do a math test and your kids might ace it, and if you did that test a week later, half of us could fail. So I mean my room's very structured, right? We do a lot of we have lots of scheduling, and everybody knows exactly what we're doing at a certain time, and that was really hard for me too because I'm very disorganized. But it helps everyone knowing, okay, I'm here now, I got into this time, so I'm going to start here, right? And we build on that. So that's very structured, but the academic part, like in terms of, I don't do a lot of testing. I'll do self-evaluations. We'll do chats about their learning just to see where they're at, what they're comfortable with. And it's just constant review, right? Okay, let's try that again and see where we're at today. We've been working on time. We thought we had it figured out at Christmas, took 2 weeks off, came back, and we couldn't figure out how to tell time again, right? So we've been really working on that a lot, and it's eating up a lot of our day. But at the end of the day, that's something we need to do if we're going to be scheduled, right? We need to know how to tell time. Indigenous education is, again, I think it's more about respecting what everyone has to offer, as opposed to what it looks like on the outside. A lot of people come to our school and they see drumming and they see regalia and they think that's cute, and that's Indigenous education, and it's just it's the wrong message. I mean, regalia and drumming is important. Beating is important, but it's also, I think it becomes well, I want to say tokenized. I think people use that as we'll make, here's your dream catcher. There you go. That's your Indigenous education. Now let's go back to reading Anne of Green Gables, right? So I've checked that box off. It's like I say, binary again, I guess. It has to be inclusive, right? With for example, we went and watched the salmon spawning, right? So we talked, the biology of the salmon, right? Important. The effects on the environment, right? And what people were using. It's inclusive. It's holistic, right? It was amazing because we had elders there. We had DOF, Department of Fisheries, was there, right? All with these different perspectives. And then in the end, and we're eating dried salmon, and you're watching ravens eat salmon, and it just all fits, right? And this is your territory, and this is what's going on the land, right? And it's, I don't know, that to me, that's what's important. We do, for example, like we hatch salmon here, so we're lucky we have a couple classrooms where we grow salmon from eggs and then we release them. And then we get to see, in the fall, we see the salmon returning to spawn. And, when we have feasts, we have salmon. When elders come in, we have salmon. We go and watch our language teacher. I mean, her and her husband still go out and net salmon in the river, right? It's a real thing, and it's very important. And you can do math with that, right? You can do patterning with salmon. From K to 7, from K to 12, it's all there. I mean, that's what it needs to look like. It needs to include what's happening in the territory, right? Not just salmon. Like I said, when I worked as an archaeologist, I mean, learning about how trails are used and reused, right? So there's mapping, and the history of it, right? Um, I found a trail when I was an archaeologist, and so you GPS the trail and you flag it out and you write it down and it's going this way. And then as a teacher, I was reading the book Stony Creek Women to my class, and they talk about the trail they used to get from Clucas Lake to the Nechako River, and they went by this lake, and I mean that's the trail I was on. Like it's and they're like, well, yeah, we know that. Like, and I said, but I found that trail, and they're like, well, it was never lost. Like it, like that, and to me, that was the right there. Like, that's Indigenous education. Like, yeah, of course the trail's there. That's what we said. Like, why wouldn't it be, right? It's just, I think Western scientific, what would you call it, education, you get kind of trapped in that proof thing, and you forget, right? And it's a exercise in futility sometimes. Kind of jaded. I want to stay in this building. I want to stay in this neighborhood. And for me, we need to look at thinking outside the box. I really want the school open all summer. Our kids, they don't have a lot to do in the summer, right? Like I say, I mean, it's a tough neighborhood, right? They need somewhere to go. We need to be open later. We're running a program right now. That's why I was late. We have an after-school program. It's after-school academic proficiency. We go till 4:30, 3 days a week, and this is funny because we're supposed to be doing more math and language. But with the sun, like now, all we can do is go outside, and we're doing raspberries. We're going to get some supalali. So it's ningwas. It's Indian ice cream. So it's a very tart berry. But we want in those bins out front. We're going to have all the different berries from the territory, just so we can have that catalog on school grounds. Like this is ningwas right here, and then, this is salal or whatever, right? Just so that's what my group's doing right now, and I guess it's still language and it's still math, but it's not what I don't think it's what the district had in mind when they gave us this program. So I would love to see us. I have kids that show up at noon, so why don't we have a classroom that's open from noon till even 8 o'clock, right? Instead of having breakfast, they can have supper here. I mean, if that's when you're ready to learn, that's when you should be here, right? If dragging a kid in at 8:30 in the morning when they've been up till midnight and they're exhausted is kind of pointless. So just things like that. I mean, everybody loves to get their summers off, but I hunt. I would love to have September, October off instead. So I would gladly, if we could, find the people to shift that year around and or teach all year. Like the whole summers off is kind of an outdated. Again, a prairie kids had to be on the farm, right? Mm-hmm. That's not the truth anymore. So we need to look at that.
More flexibility.
Totally, and why not, right? Like if the cost of kids not getting an education is much more expensive than the cost of changing what we're doing. So and what we're doing, I don't think is working. Like we have kids who don't want to leave here at 2:30, right? We can't get them in the building in the morning, and they don't want to leave in the afternoon. But we're out the door. Like there should be somebody here, right? Mm-hmm. We're missing an opportunity. And those kids are missing an opportunity. So that's what I think needs to happen. And we need to be on the land. I always tell the story. There's an archaeology site not very far from here, and it's a very significant site. And I like to take a group of grade 7s up there. And the first time I took them up there was pouring rain, and they first thing they did was we got there and they all laid in puddles, and then they were just running around. And I'm trying to tell them the history of this archaeology site, and they're not listening, and they're running around. And I was like, this sucks. Like, this is terrible. Like, this is a waste of a day. And then after about 20 minutes, they just calmed down. It was just like a nature deficit disorder thing. They just had to absorb that, and they just went, okay, I got it. And then they, okay, we're good now. And it went great after that, right? It was pretty cool. Our kids... I see that a lot if we go for a hike. We went to strip some Birch Bark the other day, and walking there was a nightmare, and because they were just, it's almost just out of control, right? They're so, it's like an endorphin rush, the fresh air and everything, right? And they're like, okay, and I just let them go and do their running around, but they sharp sticks and everything and rocks, but they're all okay. And then on the way back, the just the reflection, like, that birch bark wasn't ready yet, and like we saw some caterpillars, and just things like that. They were reflecting on what they saw, so it worked, right? It didn't seem like it at the time, but you know what? Like once they regulate and they get into that zone, and it gets easier every trip, right? There was my first 2 years here, I was scared to leave the building with my class. I thought I'd lose somebody, right? And you just got to trust, and they'll figure it out, right? We just need people. I'm sure there are more teachers who would love to work in the summer. I am sure there were teachers who would, you do mornings, I'll do afternoons, right? You come in from 8 to noon and I'll do whatever, 1 to this. And I think it just needs to be put out there, right? Addressed at the district level. I mean, I'm sure there are other districts that do it. There are places that do all year school, and there are, some schools come back to school in August instead of September. I think just a willingness to try, right, to get out of that rut. And holy cow, that's one thing I've really learned is the education system is a system, and it's designed to churn out, right, citizens, right? It's really easy to get in that trap. Like, let's get out there and try something different and go for it. That's all. Like in terms of, I don't think it would cost me any more at all, actually, but just the people to do it. And they're out there. I mean, there's so many young teachers coming up now that want to do, let's try this, let's try that, right? I'm getting too old for that. Yeah. Yeah, I don't think it would be an expense. We have this beautiful building, and it's empty right now, right? And you still got 6 hours of daylight out there. Like, we could run 2 classrooms, right? Yeah, we need a social services person in the building. We need a counselor in the building. There's a great program in Vanderhoof where the kids on Friday, they bake muffins and snacks, and then they take them home in a backpack on Friday night, and that's your breakfast for the morning, for the weekend. Because there are kids that aren't getting breakfast, right? They come to school. My kid ate like 6 pancakes today. You know what? They're just hungry, right? That's a program we need. Just lots of the stuff that's going to work social emotionally, right? Like you need to be fed and awake, right? You need to be not living in your hind brain, right? When you're surviving, you're not using that frontal lobe, and it's exhausting, and you need to come here and relax, right? If that means we have an hour on the couch playing video games, that's not a bad thing if that's what it takes to get you calm and in the building, and then whatever. So now you go to class. You find that class that starts at 10 o'clock or noon, and that's where you go.